Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I am Penna Dexter. It's our Friday weekend edition, and in studio with me as co-hosts are Jeremy Dyes, Special Counsel for Litigation and Communications at First Liberty Institute. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, good afternoon.
It's good to have you. Yes, because we're here at a certain time and not an earlier time, which we used to have.
And there are no windows in the studio, so I always forget, what time of day am I at now? Okay, well, this explains my day so far.
Well, it's a warm afternoon in Texas. Also, Keisha Russell. Keisha is counsel at First Liberty Institute. So I've got two folks from First Liberty, which gives us the opportunity, Keisha, to talk a lot about religious liberty today, which we're going to do.
Yes, my favorite thing to talk about.
Yes, and you're so good at it. So, ladies and gentlemen, we also will ask that you join our conversation as we begin to cycle through some important topics. And our number is 800-351-1212. One piece of news, because we have been talking this week about a development here in Texas where we sit as the Democrats in the State House took off before voting on a voter integrity bill and went to Washington, D.C. And, you know, what can be done about this? Well, the Speaker of the House in Texas, who's a Republican, did do something yesterday. He basically took one of the members who went off to D.C., Representative Joe Moody, and he's Speaker pro tem in the Texas House. He was stripped of that position yesterday, just as sort of, I think it's a kind of a warning shot across the bow to all the Democrats who are making it impossible to vote because they're not there, and we need a certain kind of a quorum in Texas. So we will talk about that later with Matt Shaheen, who's a Republican in the state legislature. But Jeremy and Keisha, I wanted to bring up something I read about just before I came in the Wall Street Journal. It's a piece entitled "Why the Lawyers Cartel is Pushing for Woke Law Schools," and it's the cartel is actually the American Bar Association. They are proposing new accrediting standards for law schools that would make them more race conscious, more politically correct, and less intellectually diverse. And so they're sort of regulating the entrance into the law profession in a sense. Jeremy, first of all, I know you read this. Do they have the power to do that? And I mean, why is that a wise idea or not?
Well, they have the kind of persuasive power to do this. They're the 4,000-pound gorilla in the legal world. They have a lot of professional sway within the practice of law. They present a lot of the materials to law schools to be able to use. They kind of give a stamp of approval. If you're an ABA accredited law school, it comes with a certain amount of heft and importance. Of course, they're the accrediting agency for most of these universities around the country. And so, yeah, what they say and what they request and what they encourage usually holds sway. If they're going to require you then to not only just have a position on CRT, but to then actively teach it, you're probably going to feel obliged to do so because it's the ABA. And the funny thing is, for most Americans, if you go and talk to people, as I do, and just talk to them about being a lawyer, it's fun to ask them the question, who do you think licenses me to practice law? And almost all of them will say that, well, the ABA does. Oh, that's absolutely completely false. That's not true at all. The American Bar Association is not actually a bar association. It's a professional trade group. If you want to join it, you can, but you certainly don't have to. It'd be like joining AARP. I mean, it's the same kind of thing within the practice of law. You just get to have some of these little benefits, some conferences to go to, CLE materials, that kind of thing. But I don't have to belong to the ABA, nor, frankly, do I want to. Why? Well, because in the recent years, that should have been pretty obvious. Wasn't it with Justice Barrett during her nomination as Judge Barrett? They determined that she was not qualified for office. Right. It was some other, it wasn't Barrett, it was somebody else. But anyway, they weigh in on occasion on these candidates, and they're just simply an activist organization.
I think it was Justice Kavanaugh. Was it Justice Kavanaugh?
It was probably more than one person, but
okay.
Probably Kavanaugh and Barrett, because they've gotten the worst treatment in the last couple of years as it is. But the point is that they somehow have equal status, or seen as this, quote, neutral body that can come in and provide this sort of independent evaluation of potential judges that are being nominated. They're not. Oh, and you know who it was? It was Lawrence Van Dyke. That's who it was.
Okay.
The nominee
yes.
for the Ninth Circuit. and they said he was unqualified. Well, it turns out that the person who was evaluating him had run for office against him in Montana and had a bone to pick with the guy. So, I mean, not neutral, not independent whatsoever. They have a very clear political bias, and it's very obvious from this Wall Street Journal op-ed how that bias is beginning to be expressed. Because if you don't cow to the ABA in this whole thing, you're going to be kind of on the ouster of, quote, the mainstream practice of law, and in the eyes of most Americans, maybe not even licensed to practice law. By the way, the answer to the question is the states that I practice in license me. So the state of Texas is my bar license. I also have a license in the state of West Virginia because that's where I passed the bar the first time. And then I'm also admitted to many federal courts around the country that also license my ability to practice within their jurisdictions. The ABA has no influence in my practice of law whatsoever.
So, Keisha, I would think that across the nation, most of the law schools would tend to already have sort of a liberal bent, but we do live in America, and one would think that, each law school would be able to choose, first of all, the sort of diversity policy they want to have in their own school.
Well, I think that it kind of shows you the contradiction, right? That they'll generally advocate for diversity, but as long as you're the right kind of diverse, right? You can't be a conservative and you can't be a Christian. That's not the right kind of diverse. We want a different kind of diverse. And I think in terms of legal profession, we're supposed to be teaching, producing these powerful advocates that can argue both sides of any issue. And if you're only wanting to advocate for law schools that are teaching things a certain way, you're really going to eliminate that ability for some of the people who come out of it to then become neutral arbiters of the law, to become judges and things like that. And you really don't want to produce a whole group of lawyers that are just liberal, nobody who is objective and can see both sides. And that's really what's going to happen when you do that. I think just politically what this really does is remove the opposition from the legal profession and make sure that you only have lawyers that think the way you want them to think, and only people that have a certain position on things like CRT and these other issues, that those are the ones who get licensed to practice law, and everyone else does not.
Well, this whole idea of creating some sort of equity, which is not equality, is, it's just rolling through all of our institutions right now. And I guess I thought this was another pretty telling example of that.
Oh, it absolutely is. And we're going to see more of this kind of thing. It's the ABA right now for lawyers. It will be the American Psychological Association. If it hasn't already, it's going to adopt these standards. The American Medical Association, I'm sure will have some sort of equity provision or diversity statement that requires you to have CRT or some sort of racial bias training of some sort as a part of the profession, because unless you kiss the ring of equity right now, you are on the outskirts of society and you're not even welcome in polite society, masked or unmasked. It doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not. You cannot be vaccinated enough from the issue of racial bias unless you absolutely bend the knee and say, yes, because of my white skin, I am a problem, and therefore I need to be removed from polite society.
Well, speaking of the legal profession, I watch the live stream, First Liberty Live, that you did yesterday, and I recommend it to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, because, we have been talking on Point of View for months now about the threat of court packing that the left really made. It was discussed during the campaign. Joe Biden would never say whether he was for or against it, but he did appoint a commission to study it. And Jeremy, you hosted this, or you were the prime guest on this. We're going to discuss some of the, I thought, new revelations that came out of it yesterday. We'll do that right after this. Stay with us for more Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You have probably heard comments about certain people living in a bubble. They live in affluent communities cut off from some of the realities that most Americans face. Due to the research by Charles Murray, we can now identify where these bubble communities are located. In his book, Coming Apart, he argued that a high IQ, highly educated upper class was formed over the last half century that is disconnected from the culture of mainstream America. Charles Murray put a quiz in his book that PBS decided to post online. More than 47,000 people posted their scores along with zip codes where they lived when they were 10 years old. Charles Murray did an analysis of the quiz data along with other data, and even though this is not a true representative sample of America, it does provide some interesting conclusions. Overall, it reinforces our general assumption that many of the leaders in politics, business, and the media grew up and often still live in bubble communities. For example, many of the bubbliest zip codes in America are located in New York or California. In New York City, they're found in the Upper West Side and Upper and Lower East Sides in Manhattan. They're also found in Brooklyn and the suburbs of New York. California has lots of bubble zip codes in the San Francisco region, as well as in the Silicon Valley and the Los Angeles region. We can also find lots of bubble zip codes in the Washington, D.C. area, especially in the suburban communities that house many of the politicians, bureaucrats, and other government officials that make policy decisions that affect our everyday lives. So I hope you share my concern that many of the people who have had such a significant influence in our daily lives live in a world with a very thick cultural bubble that separates them from the lives of ordinary Americans. This is not a positive demographic trend. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, almost every Thursday, I like to try to catch the live stream from First Liberty Institute called First Liberty Live because you learn a lot. And yesterday, I actually was a little bit surprised by it. Jeremy Dyes was the keynote guest, and they produced this piece that talked about what First Liberty has been kind of majoring on, other than just handling cases and clients, just sort of letting everybody know how there's sort of a coup with regard to the Supreme Court. Not the court trying to have a coup, but the left trying to change the role of the courts in the country. And this particular livecast was called How the Left is Eyeing to End Our System of Checks and Balances, with the courts being a key part of that. And Jeremy, you were there answering all the questions of the host, and I was shocked to hear, because we've been talking on Point of View, and a lot of people have been talking about the idea of court packing as a big threat, which it was a big election issue. But that's not the big threat anymore, is it?
No, court packing is kind of on the back burner because it is like dead on arrival, right? I mean, so going back in history, remember we had this big debate. It really started with Kavanaugh when he was nominated to the Supreme Court, but it really picked up fire when Justice Barrett was nominated back in, what was that, October, November, September, when we had the hearings in October, I think, before the 2020 election. And that, I mean, if you remember back to that hearing, there were so many ludicrous and outlandish ideas. I mean, I remember Sheldon Whitehouse had like one of those boards on the wall or behind him on the dais there, and he literally had thumbtacks and yarn connecting things. I mean, it was a bizarre conspiratorial picture right behind him. They all, remember, the Democrats left the hearing and they left these big, huge posters, life-size, oversized cutouts of people who were going to lose their health care because Amy Coney Barrett was going to be the next vote to overturn the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, and that did not happen, did it?
It did not happen. So all these were reasons for say this is a terribly divided court. It's a politicized court, and they're split down ideological lines, and Amy Coney Barrett's going to make it work. Didn't happen, right? The Affordable Care Act passed 8-1. She was in the majority. There was only one dissenting. It was Neil Gorsuch, who had come years earlier on that whole thing. If you go through the entire stats from this past term, 43% of the time, so of 55 opinions authored last term, only 26 were unanimous. 43% of the cases were presented as unanimous. That means that Justice Alito on the right and Justice Sotomayor on the left found a way to get to the center together. Justice Thomas and Justice Kagan found a way to go across the same bridge and vote unanimously on the same issue. And these include things like Tanzan versus Tanvir, which was a very controversial case involving the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that the left desperately wants to invalidate. No, that was a unanimous decision. Unanimous. 9 justices agreeing together on that. Fulton versus the city of Philadelphia. That was a unanimous opinion talking about LGBT policies that were preventing foster care agencies who wanted, like Catholic Social Services, who have a religious opinion about who they will place with, and they won't put in LGBT households here. 9-0. It was a unanimous decision. If you expand that out further, there are plenty of others, 16 more times in the court. So 55 opinions, 26 were unanimous, 16 more were either 7-2 or 6-3, which are significant majorities on the Supreme Court of the United States. And Obamacare was 8-1, and Justice Gorsuch dissented on these things. So the bottom line is the sky hasn't fallen. The left has never known what's going on. Our republic remains very strong, and we should not trust anyone from the left to tell us that the court needs to be refashioned whatsoever. But it was against this backdrop. Those were all the reasons they said why we needed to reform the court.
Yeah.
So President Biden, having been locked in years ago during the Thomas hearings, and when they were initially trying to pack the court back then, or there was rumors about doing so, what did he say? What was his opinion on the whole thing? He said, it's a bonehead idea. No, he said that FDR had the right to be able to propose it. He had the freedom to do so, but it was a terrible bonehead idea, according to then Senator Biden, now President Biden. So he's kind of locked into that position, not to mention which the left has really lost it back. I mean, it was the Democratic Party that killed FDR's court packing plan to begin with. So, I mean, that's kind of stuck there. So President Biden, not wanting to do too much too soon on that, I suppose, put together an ivory tower team of 36 commissioners on the Presidential Commission of the Supreme Court of the United States. Their commission lasts for 6 months. They are to meet 6 different times, and at the end of it, they're supposed to provide analysis based upon what court reform measures may be appropriate here. So they immediately dispensed with court packing. They met first in April. And at that very first meeting, it was supposed to last an hour and a half. It lasted 21 minutes. Every participant participating on the panel, as they're introducing things, were reading from a teleprompter or pieces of notes off camera. You could see their eyes moving back and forth. And they adjourned. They just kind of said what we're going to be doing. And they said so magnanimously, I might add, that the next 2 meetings in June and July, they're going to have... they're going to be having public testimony. So witnesses were going to come before the committee. And they're so grateful to add 24 witnesses for the 360 million Americans here to speak for them. 24 people were going to come in and testify on these things. So they had, I think, 12 last time. They'll have 12 next week. And you can go.
So they're meeting again next week.
Yeah, and you can go on the White House website and watch it if you want to. It's on Zoom and YouTube and all that kind of stuff.
Who are the witnesses in June?
Mostly people from the left. I think the most conservative person that I saw in there was a guy by the name of John Malcolm, who's a very good constitutional scholar from the Heritage Foundation. But most everybody is center left, if not just outright left. And so there's very few representatives from the right. Kelly, for instance, was not invited. We asked if he would be, and no one wanted to reach out to him and bring him on. Kelly Shackelford is our president at First Liberty, for those who don't know. Constitutional scholar on the Historical Society for the Supreme Court. Guy knows a few things about the Supreme Court. He should have been invited. He wasn't. And so they have had these. Well, the first time that they did this in June with these witnesses, just some really bizarre things coming out. Now, this is building off of, again, the first meeting that they had where they said, here's some of the ideas that we're kicking around on court reform. Things like, okay, they might expand the court. What does that look like? Is it 13, which is the current proposal pending before Congress right now, 18, 25, the size of the Galactic Senate and Star Wars, and how big is this thing going to get? And if we expand it, what do we do? Because are we going to have 25 justices sit all at one time to hear cases? Or are we going to split them up into smaller panels and choose them by lottery? So I get this image of like... it
would just grow and grow over the generations.
It absolutely would. And so you're picking these 3-member panels by lottery system. So I get in my mind that the clerk of the court has that ping pong ball machine that you see on the public access channels where they're picking the winning numbers for the nightly lottery, right? And they pop up, and Justice so-and-so pops up on that ping pong ball, and he or she is on that panel for that specific case. I mean, it would be bizarre. But then they also, and this is the most concerning part to me.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to explain this, Jerry.
Yeah, judicial review,
yeah,
right?
This is a nightmare.
Judicial review is that concept that is integrated into something called the separation of powers. And so high school civics reminds us that we have three separate but equal branches of government: the executive, which is the presidency, the legislative, which is Congress, House, and Senate, and then the judiciary, which are all of our courts ending at the Supreme Court of the United States in the federal system. So those are supposed to be equal, and they serve as a check and a balance against each other, so that the president can't be the king, the legislature can't be a high and mighty galactic empire kind of a senate, or like a parliament that rules by oligarchy, and then the judiciary can't rule by its own divine fiat. So all three of those work together to make sure that they are abiding by this written document that we call the Constitution. And so when the Congress passes a law, the president signs it into law, that law can be challenged in the courts and be invalidated by a majority of the court. That's called judicial review. They get to say what the law actually is based upon the Constitution, how it relates to the Constitution. Critical thing. Well, one of the proposals on the board is to do away with judicial review whatsoever. The Supreme Court actually couldn't engage in judicial review of any act of Congress. I have no idea how that would actually work.
I mean, that's alarming. I mean, it's unconstitutional on so many levels, right? But see, the issue is we're having this discussion about judicial review, and the reason why they're having that discussion is because they feel like the courts have become too powerful, right? That even the conservatives have this argument that sometimes the courts are making law, not just interpreting law, right? And we know this has happened in a number of issues. Abortion is probably the one that everyone can point to. But one of the issues with that is that we've got these problems like healthcare and immigration that the executive branch deals with, or the judicial branch deals with, because Congress will not deal with it.
They're chicken.
Right. And so if everyone was doing their jobs the way they were supposed to be doing their jobs, then we wouldn't really need to have this conversation. Not that I think we need to have it at all, but part of it is because all of the branches are not doing their jobs.
Yeah, I also see we're coming up on a break, so we will continue this discussion. And by the way, if you have a question on this would be a great time to call in 800-351-1212. But this is a huge movement because if it were successful, it would change our system of government completely.
Oh, yeah. Change America.
And so it's very dangerous. And so we need to pay a lot of attention to it. I do think it has to do with who's in power, though. I don't think this would be attempted if we had a conservative administration, House and Senate. We'll talk about that and more after this.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. Jeremy Dyes and Keisha Russell from First Liberty Institute are with me in studio. I want to point you to pointofview.net, maybe during the next break or when you have a moment. A couple of things. First of all, Jeremy's been talking about really the Supreme Court, all the courts, the judicial system, and the effort on the part of the left to change that system. And we were discussing the various ways it might be done. And Jeremy's written a piece for The Hill, No Reason to Pack the Court. You can find it at pointofview.net. You can also click through to First Liberty Institute or just go to firstliberty.org, and you can watch the First Liberty Live episode from yesterday that talks about this issue of the left really trying to end our system of checks and balances, and they see the court as such a big threat. And so, court packing was the big threat during the election, but it was really never going to happen, apparently, Jeremy. But what could happen?
Well, a lot of things could happen here, and we're still trying to figure out what the third option is likely to be here, or third, fourth, fifth options that could be here. But at the bottom line, what they're attempting to do, what the left is attempting to do, what liberals are really trying to accomplish here in effecting this court reform writ large, is to remove the judicial independence of our judiciary, is to make them another political system in which they can game and then advantage to themselves to be able to accomplish their legislative mission. Just take judicial review as a great example of that. Let's say you get rid of it altogether. Well, there's then no stopping you, right? You can just run ramshot. Whoever owns the White House and the Congress, as the Democrats own both right now, they have no impediment to them at all. They can get rid of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act with impunity because no one's going to stop them. They can suppress your free exercise of religion because no one's going to say the Constitution won't let you do that.
Suppress every freedom.
Exactly, they can suppress all freedom. So I don't know that they'll get rid of it entirely, but let's say they go do a lesser option, saying you need to have a supermajority to invalidate an act of Congress. That's just bizarre.
So like maybe six?
Probably 7-2. I think 7 justices would be necessary to be a supermajority on that.
So would this go across the courts? All the federal courts?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a great question because I don't know how that would work out because most circuit courts are done by panels of 3. And so I don't know exactly how it's going to work out. I think it's going to require the Supreme Court, but they're going to talk about a lot of things on these things. They could add more circuits to have review, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. It just depends on what that would do and what they're attempting to do there. Basically, put a big bolus of judges on the bench that are from the deep bench from the left to be on the courts right now, because they said that President Trump engaged in court packing. Well, how did he engage in court packing? He filled empty seats. That's what he did. He filled the seat of Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg and Justice Kennedy when they died. And so that's not court packing. That is just simply fulfilling your duties as a president to nominate and confirm by the Senate. What about the lower court judges? Well, the right did a really good job of making sure that they had those seats filled. That's what it comes down to. President Obama did a really good job of making sure
President Trump jumped on it.
He did.
And President Obama has jumped on it just as quickly.
He did too. That's exactly right. And so that's the privilege of winning the White House. And the founders set it up that way so that we would have that level of independence. Why? Because if President Obama sets up a bunch of judges in office, they're going to stick around for the rest of their lives and are going to affect President Trump and President Biden and future president. Whoever these people will be, they'll be there for a long time. And so that sort of judicial prerogative will be around for decades to maintain some sense of normalcy and solidity within our country. And providing that independence is essential for the future propagation of our country. Judges don't always make the right decision. Look, we will be the first ones as lawyers to tell you that.
Yeah.
But they, by and large, look, that's why we have 3 levels, right? You enter into the district court at your first complaint. You appeal that to a court of appeals. If they don't do it right, you can appeal it to the whole court of appeals. So you go from a panel to the full panel, the en banc panel. And from there, you can go to the Supreme Court of the United States. So you have multiple steps along the way where you can have things adjust. Look at Bill Cosby as a great example, right? He went to court, he was taken to court, I should say, Whether or not they did that trial correctly, I don't really know. But I do know that on appeal, the judges said, no, you didn't give this guy a fair trial. He's out. And that may not be your favorite example to use. It's not my favorite example to use, but it does provide us some clarity as to getting multiple chances and opportunities to have your case heard and reviewed in justice, impartially meted out to us all. But if they tinker with this, they stand in the way. Let me give you one more good example of getting.
But why does the left? This is a question I have for both of you. Maybe Keisha, you can start answer this first. Why does the left do this when they know they're not always going to be in power?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good question. It's like you're thinking about today and not tomorrow. But ultimately, the system is in place to prevent tyranny, right? And it's prevent, the left or the right or anyone from being able to take over an entire country and control what you do and what you say and how you live. And sort of the structure that Jeremy's mentioning really prevents that from happening. The fact that you can have justices on the court from Bush to Clinton to Obama for the rest of their lives means that you're going to have to cross some of these judges at some point in time when you're adjudicating a case. And ultimately, if you prove your case all the way through, you're going to succeed. And you have to have an argument that can impact both sides ultimately in order to prevail. And I think that that's true in every system of government, that this system is in place to prevent us from being tyranny.
Aren't they worried, though, that this could turn around and be used against
Well, it will,
them?
Right? So that's the problem with the court packing scheme, right? And they have to know that as soon as if they were to add judges onto the court, then what happens when the Republicans are a party? Well, they'll do the same thing because they have to in order to maintain some sort of balance. And then you've got a judicial system that's completely destroyed, right? It's just political in nature. And certainly that's what Jeremy is describing just in totality about why what the left is doing here is just an affront to our entire system of government. Yeah,
that's all true. But I think it's actually we're at a worse place than even that now, because I don't know that if the proposals that are on the table on this commission are successful, I don't actually know that we get to another presidency to be able to flip it around.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the idea of just about everything they're doing right now.
They've played this game for a long time to get to this point, and the game right now is to say, we're going to fundamentally transform this. You've heard them say that in campaigns. The quote, squad is constantly saying that. And that's been adopted kind of as a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of way by President Biden and Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris.
And we're starting to see what that really means.
Now we can see what that really means. And what that would mean would be something very similar to Venezuela. Now, I recognize that's kind of an extreme example, but it stands to reason. When Hugo Chavez took over, he expanded his court from, I think it was 12 to 22 or something like that. And then he added another certain amount. It got all the way up to 36 people. So they had 36-member Supreme Court down in Venezuela. After 45,000 opinions that were issued by that court, how many went against the Maduro-Chavez regime? 0. Not 1, not 12, not 100, out of 45,000 opinions. 45,000 opinions issued by this expanded court.
It's obviously not
0.
It's not against a court. It's not performing the role of a court.
It is a rubber stamping entity, right? And that's exactly what the left wants. They own the presidency. They own the Congress for right now. As long as they can hold on to that for a while, they can change the Supreme Court, the judicial system. They can own it all, and they won't have anything stopping in their way from fundamentally transforming this country. What do you think that means? I mean, they truly, genuinely want to fundamentally rechange this country. That's why in June, when this professor from Harvard was advocating that we get rid of judicial review, he meant every word of it. Because if that is, they know that is an impediment to totalitarianism, to liberal oligarchy, if nothing else. It gets in the way of not just democratic socialism, but socialism itself, and prevents that from actually going. It is, in other words, the great protector of freedom. Judicial independence is our last safeguard to our civil liberties. That's what we need our judiciary to be able to do. What's the good of having freedom at all if the courts will just simply be corrupt and bend in submission to any one of the political machinations of the left? It's worthless to have that kind of, quote, freedom, because it's not actual freedom. It's just simply a mirage. So let me pay off with this here, because I know we got about a minute to our next break. Here's what I want to encourage people who are listening, and my hope is that your blood has begun to boil just a little bit in this conversation. There's a whole lot more. This is just the tip of that iceberg. There's a lot more beneath it. A couple things. Go to supremecoup.com. Supreme Coup, C-O-U-P. Supremecoup.com is the website we've set up for this whole thing to get a whole bunch of information out to you and to everybody else. Share the stuff that's on that page. It's all very created to be very shareable. Put it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all the other things that you will possibly end up in Facebook jail for. You won't with these, trust me. But put them out there. Get the information out there right now. What you're defending is the status quo, and that's hard to defend. Number two, in a couple days, we're going to have you get an opportunity for you to join a public comment that will be submitted to this commission. Look for the opportunity to join that as well, so that the whole commission knows this is the wrong thing to do. We need to preserve our judicial independence, preserve the way the Supreme Court has been designed by the founder to be.
I'm glad you wrapped up with that. Sometimes people don't know how to do a public comment, but you're going to make it easy, so people should stay tuned for that and stay tuned for more of Point of View. Parents across the nation are learning that their K-12 children are being indoctrinated in critical race theory, and some are responding to protect their kids. Teachers and administrators have been known to deflect questions from parents about CRT, explaining that, yes, of course we teach history. We teach the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement. Some don't even know that their curriculum is filled with CRT. One historian and educator wrote a helpful article entitled, "How Will You Know If Critical Race Theory is Taught in Your Child's School?" The author, Kevin Roberts, is president of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, a group that has been an important player in bringing CRT to the attention of the Texas legislature. Dr. Roberts points out that it's helpful to listen for certain terminology associated with CRT. He includes a list of buzzwords. First is equity. That's the goal of CRT. It sounds similar to equality, but it's quite the opposite. Kevin Roberts explains that instead of ensuring that every American has an equal opportunity to succeed, equity demands equality of outcomes. Secondly, CRT always assumes there is implicit, unconscious, internalized bias, which translates to racism in every aspect of American life. The schools will search for this and insist students do the same. Also key to critical race theory are the concepts of social justice and restorative justice. These require that society must be torn down and remade in order to combat racism. Other terms are systemic racism, it's in every institution, microaggressions, which can be the slightest insult against people of color, white privilege, which critical race theorists say drives everything, and white fragility. Dr. Roberts says white fragility is any objection to any tenet of critical race theory, sort of a gotcha phrase. Anti-racism is the rallying cry. Anti-racists fight racism with racism. Dr. Roberts lists additional buzzwords and reminds parents that CRT is state-sponsored racism, and they will need courage to fight it. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Let me open the phones. I encourage phone calls on this issue of changing the courts. Turning us into really a tyranny is what would be the result of some of these proposals, from court packing to eliminating judicial review. We didn't even talk about term limits for justices, but that's another part of it. Anyway, give us a call if you want to ask a question or make a comment on this issue, 800-351-1212. And I want to get on also to another case of First Liberties.
And I'll just one more thing to put in there.
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to encourage people again to go to supremecoup.com. this is a very complex issue, and I know that I talked really fast because I've been looking at this for several months now. By the way, I said the first meeting was in April. I meant May. I got that wrong. I want to correct that too.
He gets all fired up about it.
I am very excited because look, this is a critical issue for our generation.
We should all be fired up about it.
So please go to supremecoup.com. We've really tried to disambiguate everything on that page so that you can have that clearly in front of you, and there'd be no kind of confusion whatsoever. It's a complex issue. We've tried to break it down as much as we can there for you to carry home. And supremecoup.com one more time. I'm sorry. Next
supremecoup.com. And also, there's an article that Jeremy wrote. If you just want something to read real quick right now, the article in The Hill that Jeremy wrote is also kind of summarizes some of the stats, I think, that you mentioned just now. So that's there too, pointofview.net. But Keisha, we got some good news this week on the case front. There's a good decision out of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit on your client, Judge Mack. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have a client by the name of Judge Mack who has chaplain-led invocations in his courtroom, and the Fifth Circuit granted us a pretty great decision on that front, giving Judge Mack a stay. So I'll let Jeremy talk about it a little more because he knows a lot about that case.
Well, Judge Mack is a what do you call him? A justice of the peace. That's the word I was looking for. I got myself tongue tied there.
And he's also the coroner.
And he's the coroner.
Yes.
So a JP is more than what the guy was on Mayberry, right? He actually does more than just marry people. He takes care of a lot of low-level stuff, right? So it's he's the coroner, so he's got to go out to the scene and pronounce people when they are, in some of the worst situations that they. I mean, he just last weekend, as a matter of fact, he got called to a lake where someone had gotten in a boating accident. And he had to pronounce somebody at the lake, and a very gruesome death that they occurred there. It was terrible. And so when he got into office, he realized how awful some of these things are, and how hard it was for him, for how hard it was for the officers that were involved. And then also how hard it was for the families. And so he started just reaching out to every religious person, every religious leader in that area, Montgomery County, Texas, and saying, hey, look, I could really use people who could be kind of a chaplaincy corps for me so that I can put them on call, and when a terrible thing happens, I can call them, you can come and love on the family. Would you be willing to do that? And huge outpouring of people wanted to come out and do that. Baptists, Presbyterians, Catholics, Buddhists, Muslim, Jews, all of them were represented. All of them wanted to be a part of it all. Open his courtroom session. So at the beginning of the day, people are there. They're coming in for, $500 or less kind of disputes with contracts, rent disputes, minor arraignments for misdemeanors, things like that, traffic tickets, things like that. In opening his court, he put together an entire opening process. You say the Pledge of Allegiance, you say the Pledge of the Flag in Texas, you say the Pledge of Allegiance, and all these things. He decided to also recognize the chaplain for the day, and one of these people that had volunteered their time, explained what they do, and then he turns the mic over to them to say whatever words they want, and most of them to spend the time saying thank you, and then they offer a prayer to begin the day as sort of an invocation of things. That's the process. Well, the left doesn't like that. So the Freedom from Religion Foundation, well, it wasn't them first. Somebody may have been them, one of their members, sent a complaint to the Commission on Judicial Conduct in the state of Texas, which is this body that reviews judges for ethics violations. They found out, they decided that he had actually violated the ethics rules and was biased towards his people by putting this process in place. And we defended him on that and figured that one out. Then they sued, the FFRF sued in Montgomery County Federal District Court. Mm-hmm. They lost. They brought another lawsuit, this time in his official capacity, and sued the wrong entity, and so they got poured out on that part of it all.
Great lawyering, guys.
But frankly, the judge down there seemed to really want to rule in a certain way against Judge Mack, and did so. And now we're on appeal to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. We have a stay in place that was a blistering opinion written by Judge Oldham that basically said, we think the judge got it wrong, and we're putting in a stay on this because Judge Mack had another complaint filed against him at the Judicial Conduct Commission down in Austin again. And so we're saying, look, his rights are clearly in jeopardy right here, and the district court won't give us a stay. Thankfully, the Fifth Circuit has. He's okay for right now. So that was the major win last week, was that we've got this stay in place that basically says, it's over 10 pages, this district court got it wrong. wrong, really, really wrong, and we're not going to let him get have any further problems until we get the whole Fifth Circuit together to figure out what the merits of this case are all about.
So how long will that take?
Well, I mean, briefing is due, I think, by the end of next month or maybe this month. I can't recall. Our opening briefs are due next month. That's what it is, at the end of August. And then
it'll be at least a couple months.
Yeah, so we're going to be 6 months.
But this has been going on for years, right?
Oh, yeah. This is going back now 6 years, I think, but not 7.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
So now imagine yourself, right? What were you doing 6 years ago? Can you even remember? Judge Mack has had to sit for about a day's worth of time, about 8 hours worth of depositions to remember what he did 6 years ago on this whole thing. And frankly, look, here's the deal. Courts for our entire nation's history have done what he's doing. The Supreme Court of the United States, it may be a short one, but they still offer a prayer before they begin their sessions.
Yeah, that's right.
God save this honorable court. And we've got our briefing you should actually go to firstliberty.org and read our briefing. Yeah. Because we worked really hard on it. We'd like to have people, the judges, read it.
They're interesting sometimes.
But these are really interesting because it goes through the entire history of how religion has interacted in the public square, before legislatures, city councils, but also within our courts. And there's a big surprising history in there. In fact, I was unaware of a lot of it, of how judges and justices have begun their courts with prayer, again, since before we were even a country, but certainly all the way through our entire process. That's Judge Mack. And right now we're sitting pretty. We're hopeful for his case to go forward. We got a great win last week, and I think that one's going to be secured.
And pray for Judge Mack, y'all. He's been through a lot over this past 6 or 7 years, and they're not done with him yet. It's just a relentless assault, on his, faith and his willingness to reach out to people spiritually, and it's really unfortunate. So pray for him.
Yes, and another one that I always pray for of your clients is Coach Kennedy, because it's the same thing. I mean, these people step up and they really give up in order to stand for religious liberty or for their own rights. They give up, a part of their life really to do that, and they're doing it for, of course, their own situation, but they're also doing it for others.
Yeah, standing
And so
firm.
Coach Kennedy is another one who, he comes to mind to pray for, and I hope folks will do that.
Yeah, so for Coach Kennedy, we're waiting for an en banc hearing at the Ninth Circuit, see what's going to happen there. And then if things don't go our way, once again, then we'll be taking that to the Supreme Court. But yes, Coach Kennedy's case has been going on for a long time. And for those of you who don't know, Coach Kennedy was a high school football coach in Washington State. And he was taking, after the football games, going out and thanking God for the time by himself at the 50-yard line, doing a really short 15-second prayer. And he was fired for that. And we went to district court, and the Ninth Circuit lost there. The Ninth Circuit said some pretty alarming things. One of those things was that teachers and coaches have no constitutional rights, no First Amendment rights, while they are in the presence of students. The Supreme Court did not take the case, but issued a blistering statement about that, saying that in fact was not true. And so now we're going back up the courts again, and we'll see what happens with Coach Kennedy.
It could be very important. Well, in the next hour we will talk about they're protesting in Cuba. Some people think it's about COVID-19. It's for freedom. We'll talk about that, and also vaccine pressures taking place across the country. Stay with us for more Point of View.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View radio talk show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook. Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm glad you're with us for this second hour of our weekend edition today. I have Keisha Russell and Jeremy Dyes from First Liberty Institute. And Keisha was with me last week, and we tried not to do too much damage. But after we were gone and that weekend, something just amazing happened in the streets of Cuba. In about 15 cities across Cuba, there were demonstrators out in the streets. And, the news was reporting that they were demonstrating because of lack of food, lack of government services, healthcare, medicines, just repercussions from COVID. It's really running rampant there in Cuba. And all of that is true. But truthfully, many were carrying flags. They were demonstrating for freedom. And it's taken all the way through the week until yesterday for President Biden to admit that actually communism is bad. It's a bad thing. And that, that's what is really wreaked havoc in that country. We ought to stand against it. And all of the above. So now there have been Sunday, there were about 100 people arrested. And by Thursday, many, many more people have been arrested. And the authoritarian governments across the world have really seemed to have the upper hand in a lot of these situations. And it was just so interesting how the Castro brothers were able to retain power for so long. But now Fidel Castro is dead and his brother Raul stepped down. And the successor, he just doesn't seem to be able to provide what this utopian communism, totalitarianism purports to be able to provide. And so, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And a lot of it has to do with how the United States reacts to this. But I think one of the really wonderful reactions was the carrying of the flag. Mm-hmm. And that's just a visual statement, I think, that these people want freedom, as all people do across the world. I mean, we're just really made to want to live in freedom. And America is still a symbol of that, as much, even though there are many in this country that hate our flag and would not want to fly it. So I'd love to have the two of you comment on that, and also any listeners who'd like to call in on the flag and what it means as these protesters who have suffered so much in Cuba are now carrying it. 800-351-1212. Keisha?
I think it's a really good opportunity to educate our country about the privilege that exists of living here, the way other people see us as that symbol of freedom, and the fact that many people, especially young people, are being taught otherwise, that there are so many things wrong with America and there's so many things wrong with, the privilege that exists for one section and not the other, right? But what I think this situation has the opportunity to do is to teach us all, what we really have in this country. And although we might be able to point to things that may or may not be perfect, that we all have the ability to contribute to America being as great as we all know that it can be and really is. And I think, seeing people in another country carrying our flag proudly should be an indication to us that even we should be walking around with that flag just as proudly. We just have such a profound, opportunity here to really show not only each other, but our children, what this really means. And, even though right now they're all being taught something different.
Yeah, they are. And, even though we're not perfect, and we've never been perfect.
And nothing is. Nowhere is
no,
perfect.
it isn't. But we still have aspirations, and we have progress that's made. And so, instead of always focusing on the mistakes of the past, and just trying to divide us according to race, it's a good opportunity to kind of foster the patriotism that's sort of been waning away.
And contribute to the country, like wanting to make it better, talking about if you see that things are wrong, you contribute to making it better, not tearing it down, not destroying it, not eroding the very things that have contributed to our freedom and to the progress. And I think that's the most important thing, is looking to contribute and not to tear down and degrade and erode and just completely change our system altogether. And in many ways, advocate for the very things that the people in Cuba are protesting against right now.
What do you think about the idea of, I think it's our head of Department of Homeland Security, who says if they come over water, they don't get to stay here?
Well, they need to come up through the Central American route, apparently. That's the route you're allowed to come through. You're not allowed to come through by water. Look, I mean, maybe they just haven't gotten the memo, right? I mean, that's supposed to be a flag of shame and oppression, not of freedom. Why are they waving that? It's supposed to be a universal symbol for oppression. Do these people want to oppress native populations? Is that what they're trying to communicate to the Cuban government there? Hey, no, we don't want your totalitarian regime. We want to be oppressed further by racial segregation of some sort. That's the message that we've been having for the last couple of years in this country. Why do they want to get rid of socialism? I mean, I thought that's something we're supposed to be all about right now. These are the people that have the quintessential version of socialism. Wasn't it Bernie Sanders who praised their healthcare system and said that they've got the envy of the world? Them in Canada have the greatest socialistic healthcare systems in the country. You can go and get free healthcare in any one of the infected areas of their hospitals to be able to get that free healthcare. That they should be. We should be swimming across the channel to get to Cuba to be able to get in there. Why isn't DHS taking raft loads of Americans over there to get in? I saw somebody present the idea, and maybe this is a good idea. I don't know, but maybe we could just do a swap of freedom-loving Cubans for BLM protesters. Maybe they want socialism, and the people in Cuba who are waving these flags don't want socialism. Maybe we should just arrange a swap of people. I mean, just you guys can have our BLM folks, and we'll take your Cuban folks, and that'd be great. I'm in favor of this. I think this is a great idea. Oh, and it's also great to see now that apparently it's a problem to protest again. You can't, in Cuba now, these protests are causing all kinds of COVID spikes all of a sudden. I mean, a year ago, that was no problem at all. All these protests around the country and the world were, that was your patriotic duty to get out there and protest against Donald Trump and support the BLM movement and all these kinds of things. But
because racism was a pandemic, remember?
Right. So. That's not a problem in Cuba because that's socialism, right? That they created all the equal society, the equity that we're talking about occurred down there because it's clear equity. It's either you're part of the Castro family or you're in jail or dead. I mean, that's clear equity. I mean, I don't quite understand why this is a problem here. Of course, I'm talking very strongly tongue-in-cheek. I hope everybody's caught that clear message here. We are the envy of the free world for a reason.
Right.
And we better keep ourselves the envy of the free world because of the reasons that we've been the envy of the free world. What was it? Millard Fillmore said that one time that America is great because she is good. If she ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. And we are right on the knife's edge of that moment right here in our current present reality. We are ceasing to be good, meaning we oppose the good, the just, and the beautiful in our everyday society, and we want all the opposites of those things to reign in their place. We're going to end being good, and we will end being great if we do not turn around and begin to focus again upon being the good things that have made America over the centuries that we've been around.
Yeah, and you even talked about how President Biden will talk about communism and how it's wrong, but really the educating the public,
doing that yesterday.
But very little, right? There's really not a lot of substance for him to say this is why it's bad. And the conservatives have a really great opportunity here to fill in all those blanks.
Yes, the Cubans have reminded us, and we need to take up the mantle. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You have probably heard comments about certain people living in a bubble. They live in affluent communities cut off from some of the realities that most Americans face. Due to the research by Charles Murray, we can now identify where these bubble communities are located. In his book, Coming Apart, he argued that a high IQ, highly educated upper class was formed over the last half century that is disconnected from the culture of mainstream America. Charles Murray put a quiz in his book that PBS decided to post online. More than 47,000 people posted their scores along with zip codes where they lived when they were 10 years old. Charles Murray did an analysis of the quiz data along with other data, and even though this is not a true representative sample of America, it does provide some interesting conclusions. Overall, it reinforces our general assumption that many of the leaders in politics, business, and the media grew up and often still live in bubble communities. For example, many of the bubbliest zip codes in America are located in New York or California. In New York City, they're found in the Upper West Side and Upper and Lower East Sides in Manhattan. They're also found in Brooklyn and the suburbs of New York. California has lots of bubble zip codes in the San Francisco region, as well as in the Silicon Valley and the Los Angeles region. We can also find lots of bubble zip codes in the Washington, D.C. area, especially in the suburban communities that house many of the politicians, bureaucrats, and other government officials that make policy decisions that affect our everyday lives. So I hope you share my concern that many of the people who have had such a significant influence in our daily lives live in a world with a very thick cultural bubble that separates them from the lives of ordinary Americans. This is not a positive demographic trend. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. Keisha Russell and Jeremy Dys are with me, and we're having too much fun here during the break. But let's take a call from Mark. We are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. Mark is in California listening on KNLB. Hi, Mark. Thanks for calling.
Hi. The national anthem, they just did a play. I saw it on TBN. They were trying to knock down the flag at Fort McKinley.
Knock it down?
Yeah, that's what they showed in their play. And they kept showing the people lifting up the flag, and that's what we need to do in our country, but not just to lift up the flag, but lift up what it stands for here. We need to fight for this nation. This is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Liberty is not freedom. Liberty is a God-given right. Freedom is something that they talk about. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, they're all inalienable rights from God. That's why people want them. We have them here. We have to protect them for us and then protect them for them.
Mark, thanks for the reminder. Certainly what you're all about at First Liberty Institute, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's what we do. And, our mission to defend religious freedom, I think, is such an honor for us to be, able to work for an organization like this and work for people like Coach Kennedy and Judge Mack and, help them, stand firm in their faith so that other people can see it too. I think one of the most powerful things that we do, and I know Jeremy would agree because he's so good at this part, is really talking about what we do and getting our message out into the public and letting people know that we're here to defend their religious freedom and their constitutional rights. So firstliberty.org if you want to check out what we do.
Yes, and I do think it's important to talk about it, and you have such a robust ability to do that. So many good people that love to, share with the public. And, that goes beyond the core mission of defending your clients and their religious liberty. So I think that piece of it, that part of it is really important. And both of you are great at that. So anyway, we will continue to take your calls at 800-351-1212. A shocking piece came across my desk this week. I was at a Breitbart, and I posted the article at pointofview.net. Do you remember Kathleen Sebelius?
How could we ever forget?
She was Secretary of Health and Human Services. I
remember the lawsuit, all the lawsuits that had her name on it.
Right, and it was when Obamacare was passed,
Mm-hmm.
and it was passed by all Democrats. And she was, if you read the law, which we kind of did, a lot of reading pieces of it, seeing the power to implement this portion of it is given to the secretary. The secretary was Kathleen Sebelius, so she had a lot of power. She's now saying she's retired from all of that. This was under the Obama administration. But she says unvaccinated Americans should not be allowed to work or have access to children. She said this on a show called Out Front. Americans who have not received a coronavirus vaccine should not be allowed to work or have access to children, and they should be limited on where they are allowed to go. And here's the quote. We're in a situation where we have a wildly effective vaccine, multiple choices, lots of available, free of charge, and we have folks who are just saying, I won't do it. I think that it's time to say to these folks, it's fine if you don't choose to get vaccinated. You may not come to work. You may not have access to a situation where you're going to put my grandchildren in jeopardy, where you might kill them, or you might put them in a situation where they're going to carry the virus to someone in a high-risk position. So, that's pretty strong.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that when people make these arguments, they never talk about the recovery rate for COVID. But this is also coming from the same person who said it was okay to abort children under whatever any circumstances, right?
And
force nuns to pay for abortifacient drugs. And I mean, the compulsion here is just, I mean, this is, I barely have words for what's going on here.
It's great that Kathleen has finally come around to loving children, right?
Yeah,
She's
really.
concerned about children
Really.
and their health and their survival, as a matter of fact. Look, what's going on, I think, here is that the left has really never had to make an argument to persuade people. They've only ever had to make an argument to rule them. And so they have a very difficult time now trying to persuade anybody to go do something that may be good. And so they resort, what's the old saying in the law? If your case is strong on the facts, pound the facts. If it's strong on the law, pound the law. If it's strong on either, pound the table.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
The left is just kind of like, we can't think, why can't you see how wise we are, and why can't you join that? Now, there could be, and there probably is, great wisdom for lots of people getting the vaccines. And if you are persuaded to do so, please do. I mean, there's no one stopping your way. This is the little thing we used to call in this country freedom. You have the freedom to do that. Please go ahead and do that. But by saying that we're going to ostracize you, possibly lock you away inside your home, which we called home confignment.
Or not let you go to work.
Yeah.
Or do anything or be anywhere near children. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that makes reasonable Americans go, that's unreasonable.
Of course.
I'm now skeptical of why you want me to have this vaccine.
And what happened to my body, my choice? Does that only work when we're talking about killing children, or does that work when it comes to me getting a vaccine? It's either true or it's not true. So which one is it?
Yeah, and so Kathleen Sebelius is just emblematic of the rest of the left's argument right now. Get it because you're an idiot if you don't. Well, that fails to persuade anybody. And if you want to really persuade people, then persuade them. And maybe you can make a very good argument that will get people to actually abide by your recommendations. But at the end of the day, and this is what the left has failed from the beginning of this pandemic to grasp, you cannot push people into doing something that they may not want to do. You cannot suppress their innate demand for freedom. And you have to. It was like Kristi Noem during the pandemic, right? She left the things open. She let people go. What did she do? She provided them with information, and she trusted her people to make wise decisions. DeSantis eventually came around to that way of thinking. Abbott has more or less come around to that line of thinking.
Took a little longer.
Others have as well. But the left doesn't think you have the capacity to be able to make an independent and wise decision. And so they must tell you what to do. And this is Kathleen Sebelius telling you what you have to do, rather than giving you the information that would say, oh, I can make my own decision on this.
Exactly.
800-351-1212 if you would like to weigh in on this. I might mention that, there's a lot in the news now about the variants. And so, because of the variants now, since we've really gotten some good results and good control over the pandemic, the variants are now the risk. And so, using that as another reason to force the vaccine. And then LA County has said, well, we're going to remask. And they're actually requiring all indoor establishments that people wear a mask again. And, the reason fascinates me because the hospitalizations bottomed out and they're rising again. But guess where they're rising? They're rising in the places either where there's low rates of vaccination or low levels of natural immunity. Why are there low levels of natural immunity? Because those were the places that locked down in the most draconian fashion at the beginning. So to me, I look at this and I say everybody's going to probably experience or has experienced this pandemic. And you're going to get it sometime. You're going to get it early or late. And the ones that were more free early on are probably through it by now because it looks like the vaccines are doing pretty well with all these variants that are out there too. But there's just this constant drumbeat in the media about the variants now and, other ways to try to, I don't know, they just love to have control. And this has been a modicum, a way of controlling Americans, and that it's fading now.
Yeah, no, and it's mind-boggling to the left because they're so wise and smart and smarter than you, and are so used to people just bowing at their political rhetoric every single time, and it's not seeming to work. They're not able to move the needle past that 50-60% mark of vaccinated individuals. You haven't made the case. You just haven't. And I don't think, to be fair, I don't know that Donald Trump made the case when he was in office either for the vaccine. He got it there, and for that I'm grateful for. But I don't know that that number really changes. Look, at the end of the day, you have to just simply trust the American people. They're not stupid. Human beings actually have some wisdom. And if our country has a great education system, we should be more inclined to think that our people are smart on these things. They can figure them out. And we ought to trust the American people to make wise decisions when they are presented with all the information. And Dr. Fauci didn't always give us all the information. Now we know that he didn't.
Or
the
now most accurate information.
Right, and that makes us lack more trust in our elected officials. So they need to unpack all of that and go back to just trusting the American people to make wise decisions.
More information is always better. Getting the truth is better. But the left doesn't work that way. Ladies and gentlemen, we would love to hear from you on this issue, 800-351-1212. In the next couple of segments, we're going to talk about the Democrats in Texas. We're sitting in the state of Texas, but this is really a national story, who really shirked their duty and took off before voting on a voter integrity bill in the state of Texas. And actually, there's some tools that are being employed now to try to get them back. So we will talk about it. Matt Shaheen, a Republican legislator in Texas, will also be joining us, and we'll be right back.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Along with Keisha Russell and Jeremy Dies from First Liberty Institute, and we are taking your calls. We've got a few. Here is Zach from the state of Georgia. Zach, thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call.
What is your comment on the vaccines?
Yeah, so I'm actually a very strong proponent of vaccines. I'm a pharmacist. I have a lot of firsthand experience of caring for patients with COVID in a hospital setting. So yes, everyone has had their own experiences with how COVID has affected their lives. So I'm a very large advocate for vaccines. So I think you're right. And we want to get good information in front of people. But I think, kind of as I was sharing with a screener, there's many privileges in society that we have. We can talk about freedom as a concept, but there's many things in society that we have, such as having a driver's license. You can present people with good information about how wearing a seatbelt will save their lives, but some people will take that information and not do it, and someone can receive a ticket when they're on the road. You can have motorcycles.
So you think we ought to legislate the vaccine?
Well, I think in some ways this isn't really new, right? When you drop your children off at school, when you enroll them in school, when I was very young, my parents had to present my vaccine records for me to be in public school, right? This isn't really new for children to be able to attend public schools.
But the vaccine's relatively new, though, isn't it?
And it's also not approved.
So the vaccine, it certainly is relatively new. We had a global pandemic that, if you put the greatest minds together and you take the entire globe to try and fix a problem, you put around 60 to 70 vaccines in clinical trials, and you get 3 ones that work well, something's going to work. Now, yes, is there some risks that we may not know long term? That is certainly true. That we may learn of many risks that come out with the incidence of myocarditis, with the incidence of Guillain-Barré syndrome that can occur with vaccines. Those are not things to underplay. With any vaccine, with any medication that comes to market, there's always post-marketing studies that are conducted. There have been plenty of medications that are taken off the market because it's found out that they're not safe. I have my own views on the FDA and how transparent that is, and that's another discussion. But we know, and we have seen how harmful COVID is. We know that when someone develops symptomatic COVID, there's about a 2 to 3% chance of mortality. That is extremely high, and there's been many discussions of comparing flu and comparing COVID.
But then when you break it out into demographic groups, I think people are making their calculation whether or not they're getting the vaccine based on their own risk. So certain groups, the risk is much lower than other groups. So we've talked a lot about. Yes, we persuade, and then the high risk groups. I still think they ought to be able to make their own decisions, but they do it based on their risk. And I wouldn't go as far as you to say that it should be mandatory.
But as we talk about, how does this become mandatory, right? So certainly, no, there should not be any law put in place where you just lose all of your rights completely because you're not choosing to get vaccinated. And I think that obviously, yes, there can be things that come out from the quote that you were mentioning earlier that people just shouldn't be allowed near children at all and should be just completely ostracized. I think as Christians, we would certainly not advocate for that. But as I was going back to earlier, there's certain privileges in society that we enjoy. There very well could become where we need to have vaccines to be able to fly on planes. You talk about how people make decisions for themselves and they kind of weigh their own risk. They absolutely should. But unfortunately, in this equation, you're not really making a decision for yourself. You're making a decision for exposing your risk to your loved ones. You're exposing risk to people in the checkout line. They're exposing risk to people who cannot get vaccinated because they're immunocompromised, because they have cancer, because they are going through chemotherapy, and they don't have an immune system. So unfortunately, this isn't, you're driving on the road and your oil, indicator says that, your car is at 0% and you need to change your oil. And if you don't change it, then your car is going to break down. I wish this was something where, someone could make a decision for themselves and it would only harm themselves. When unfortunately, this is this disease is very highly spread. And that's kind of where this comes into, where I think it's unfortunate some of the language that you were using of the left, as you say, wanting control. Well, I think it's just kind of this discussion of, okay, what role does government have in our lives? And I think that's completely other, that's something completely outside of this topic.
I don't think it's outside of the topic at all. But listen, Zach, thank you so much. And I certainly appreciate your calling in, your perspective as a pharmacist, and the idea that it is, in a sense, a stewardship responsibility, but it's still, it's way outside the bounds of, I think, our system for it to be mandatory. And I hope that, especially now that we are actually getting through this whole year of the pandemic, and it's not the threat that it was, that to make it more, mandatory today after we've gotten this far.
Well, I also think that, acknowledging sort of what he was saying before, that the long-term effects of the vaccine are not known. And I think a lot of people have good reason for not getting a vaccine when they don't know what the long-term effects are going to be. And until we're at a place where we know that, I think people should be well within their rights not to get it. It is something that, I think people will want to know. And that is different from some of the other things that we're forced to get vaccinated for, to go to school. Many of those vaccines have been around for many, 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 many years and decades, and people know exactly what they do and don't do.
Yeah, and truthfully, I don't know when that point is. I don't know when we reach that point. And I don't know that Zach would have a good answer for that, even if we asked him on that point. And the other ones that we do vaccinate against, yes, they're tried, true, and they work well. There are side effects to those on occasion as well. Mm-hmm. 2 points. There are a lot of people that walk among us that don't have those. They're for lots of reasons. A lot of
people make that decision, too.
For a lot of reasons. And they vary from medical to religious to everything else. But also, those diseases were significantly higher in terms of mortality.
Yes,
significantly higher. Greatly higher. So, Zach, I have a lot of sympathy for you. I do have a friendly disagreement with you on some of the left's rhetoric thing, and that was the point that I was making, not necessarily related to this vaccine, but that's how they typically try to get around with things, is to demand you do things rather than convince you do things. So don't miss my point on that issue. But look, if you want to get a vaccine, and Zach, if you want to convince people to get vaccines, I'm right there beside you, man. Go for it. We're going to argue for it.
Yeah, and he made a good argument today, so that we appreciate him.
Very good information.
Joining us. Let's take another call here before the break. Let's go to Fran in Georgia, listening in on WLPE. Hi, Fran. Oops, I didn't get you in. There you are.
Hello?
Thank you, Fran, for waiting.
I just kept thinking of a scene from the last book of the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis. He's got this ape that isn't having enough bananas and oranges, and he gets involved with some people who want to take over the country, and he's arguing with this poor old bear he says, I just want to be free. And the ape says, yes, but you don't understand. Freedom is not you doing what you want. Freedom is me telling you what to do and you doing what I tell you.
Perfect.
Wow, perfect. Thank you so much for that quote. We appreciate it, Fran. We appreciate your weighing in. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot of folks calling in on this issue. And you know what? I have
bet
a minute.
if we had all the callers call in about the issue of vaccines, I bet you we would persuade everybody.
Yeah, really. Well, here's another one from Rob in New Hampshire. Rob, we've got a minute. Are you there? I think I lost him. I lost Rob. Okay.
Rob had a great point to make.
Yeah, he did. He wanted to follow up on the pharmacist, on Zach's comments. So I'm sorry. So, Rob, for some reason, I can't get you. So I'm going to try one more time. Are you there, Rob? Can't get him. Okay, well, we've used up all our time now. I wanted to mention that in the next segment, we'll try to get to the rest of the calls, but we also have a guest who will be joining us, Matt Shaheen. He is a state representative from the state of Texas, and he's one that stayed to vote on voter integrity. Couldn't vote, though, because there was no quorum in the state legislature because most of the Democrats left and went to Washington, D.C. before having to vote on just a couple of provisions that would make voting actually doesn't really make voting harder, although that was the argument. But makes it, I guess, less easy to commit voter fraud or cheat or harvest votes. So we will talk with him about what was done and what will be done right after this.
Parents across the nation are learning that their K-12 children are being indoctrinated in critical race theory, and some are responding to protect their kids. Teachers and administrators have been known to deflect questions from parents about CRT, explaining that, yes, of course we teach history. We teach the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement. Some don't even know that their curriculum is filled with CRT. One historian and educator wrote a helpful article entitled, "How Will You Know If Critical Race Theory is Taught in Your Child's School?" The author, Kevin Roberts, is president of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, a group that has been an important player in bringing CRT to the attention of the Texas legislature. Dr. Roberts points out that it's helpful to listen for certain terminology associated with CRT. He includes a list of buzzwords. First is equity. That's the goal of CRT. It sounds similar to equality, but it's quite the opposite. Kevin Roberts explains that instead of ensuring that every American has an equal opportunity to succeed, equity demands equality of outcomes. Secondly, CRT always assumes there is implicit, unconscious, internalized bias, which translates to racism in every aspect of American life. The schools will search for this and insist students do the same. Also key to critical race theory are the concepts of social justice and restorative justice. These require that society must be torn down and remade in order to combat racism. Other terms are systemic racism, it's in every institution, microaggressions, which can be the slightest insult against people of color, white privilege, which critical race theorists say drives everything, and white fragility. Dr. Roberts says white fragility is any objection to any tenet of critical race theory, sort of a gotcha phrase. Anti-racism is the rallying cry. Anti-racists fight racism with racism. Dr. Roberts lists additional buzzwords and reminds parents that CRT is state-sponsored racism, and they will need courage to fight it. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to the final segment of Point of View, and this is the final segment. I did say I'd continue to take calls on the vaccine, but I think I'm going to have to change course a little bit here because we want to fill this segment with talk of the Texas Democrats and their little shenanigans that they pulled in the past week. And with us to do that, and we've teased this topic throughout the show, is Matt Shaheen, who is a state representative from, actually he's my state representative, and I'm so proud to have him in District 66. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Penna, thanks for having me.
Jeremy Dyes is here with me from First Liberty Institute and also Keisha Russell from First Liberty. And we've been looking forward for the whole show to having you. I guess you're just waiting down there in Austin for the Democrats to come back, right?
Yeah, I mean, they broke quorum this week. And so, constitutionally, we're not allowed to conduct. 2/3 of the members are present. So, yeah, they're on a taxpayer-funded publicity stunt in D.C., and they're trying to raise money and all that kind of stuff. We're ready to work, and here's the thing: at the end of the day, they've boxed themselves in. I think we just need to be patient for a few weeks until they cave. The governor has already declared that there'll be a special session after this current special session ends. So he's going to keep calling those. So eventually they're going to have to cave. We had a handful of Democrats actually return back to Texas today. So we'll just have to be patient. At the end of the day, we'll get these priorities done for the state of Texas.
Well, I'm not surprised that some are coming back because yesterday the speaker, as you know, he actually stripped his deputy, the speaker pro tem, actually a good friend of his, Representative Joe Moody. He stripped him of his position. And so, going to probably the highest position that you could take their position away from them was kind of a wise idea. I think, is it going to scare some others into coming back, do you think?
I think so. I mean, they're starting to feel the consequences of their actions, although I think, quite frankly, they're somewhat in this D.C. liberal bubble, and I think they're getting like a lot of positive reinforcement from their base. The problem is the rest of Texas, everyday Texans, your listeners, people throughout the nation, right? Everybody gets up early and gets ready to go to work and takes care of their family, and they have responsibilities that they take care of seriously. And here you got a bunch of, liberal Democrats that literally walk off the job, abandon their constituents. And I just don't think it's going to take them very long. So I think they're starting to feel the consequences. And again, I think eventually they'll get back.
Yeah, Matt, it's nice we finally found a segment of the Texas population that wants to leave Texas. That seems to be a rare thing. But look, for those of us who have lived here for a while, we remember that this is not the first time that this has happened. I think it was back in 2003 it happened again. So, I mean, we have precedent for this. What was the fallout from 2003, and what will be the fallout here, do you think?
Well, yeah, that's right. When they did in 2003, they actually ended up losing seats, and I think that might very much be a scenario here. I will tell you that the Texas GOP is running ads, social media ads, robocalls in several of the districts of the recalcitrant liberal Democrats that have gone up to D.C. So I think what you'll see is they'll probably lose some additional seats in the 2022 elections as a result.
Have we had any other discussions about amending our extradition agreements with the various states, including the District of Columbia, as a result of this?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's what the problem is, right? D.C. has a Democrat mayor, and they're just not going to work with us to extradite the Democrats. So one of the very first actions that we were able to take when they broke quorum was we voted to instruct the Sergeant of Arms to work with the Texas Department of Public Safety, our state troopers, to have the Democrats arrested and forced to return to the floor of the House. But again, as you point out, right there in D.C., it takes an extradition order, and they're just not going to comply. So there's not a ton that we can do along those lines. We really are going to have to wait until they come back, but the public pressure is mounting on them.
Well, look, we all understand that this is a very political stunt, and it is meant to be a political stunt. And you're right to say they're just going to have to wait this out. Eventually, they will have to return home, or at least we assume so. We've seen these kinds of stunts go awry before as well, but this is one that I think Governor Abbott's going to continue to fight out. They're going to eventually have to play the game on things. The question mark is what happens when they do come back. Penn has already alluded to, different positions that they may be removed from, committees that they would be taken off of, and that sort of thing. And I suppose those are all valuable considerations. The other question I have, are there any other types of disciplinary measures that do occur? I don't know if censure is an option or anything like that. I'm thinking specifically of anybody who posts their underwear on Twitter hasn't recently been washed. I mean, that seems to be a very censurable offense, at least offensive to my eyes at the very least. What is the House considering right now?
Yeah, I tell you what, I don't know why the Democrat caucus chair hasn't banned his members from social media. They're taking pictures of themselves in private jets on these chartered buses with beer. They are just a PR disaster. It really is just it's a PR disaster for them, the way they've been giving us ammunition on social media. So, yeah, there's going to be a discussion about that as far as, what moves that the House or the body can make. But I have to tell you, at the end of the day, we're going to pass these GOP priorities, whether it's election integrity and the governor has on there now protecting women's sports. And, we're going to get those passed, and that's probably going to be a significant amount of punishment for them. And then I'm telling you, in 2022, there's going to be some significant ramifications. So there is some discussions about what legislative remedies there are, whether it's censure or something else. Those discussions are happening. How that all plays out, I really don't know. Our focus is so much on passing these Texas.
So you have to wait there, even though you can't vote. You and all your colleagues who are Republicans, or I guess some Democrats may have stayed. Did any stay?
We have 4 that stayed at the very beginning, and then a few more came back today. And so what we're doing is, we need to have a presence at least Monday through Friday. On the weekends, there'll still be a presence, but a lot of people are going home. I'm going to be at church on Sunday. I'm going to be back in the district for church on Sunday. But yeah, we do need to have a presence because of the rest order, right? So if they were to show up, we've got to be there and ready to conduct business.
Well, you guys you're gonna be ready. Listen, I wanted to ask about a couple of provisions. We only have a minute though. So, one of the big ones that's brought up is 24-hour voting. And that's such it's just a terrible example because it only happened in Harris County, and it was only because of COVID.
Yeah, the claims of voter suppression, racism, those are lies. They're just outright lies. They're really not even worthy of debate. I will tell you the current bill under consideration has 16 hours a day that people can vote. That's more than enough for 2 weeks of early voting. It's just crazy.
All right, Matt Shaheen, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on this and just for your patience there, waiting around for the Democrats to come back. Hope you don't have to wait too long.
All right. Well, you take care. Have a blessed week.
You too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for our Friday weekend edition. I want to thank you, Keisha and Jeremy, for being with me today. It was a lot of fun. And also, Andrew, thank you so much. And Steve, for your work, and also Karen for doing everything on the web. We appreciate all of your work. And, we've really brought, I think, we brought the best foot forward of the Texas Republicans here in this final segment of Point of View. So I want to say thank you to them. They had to sit down there in that hot capital of Texas. Yeah. We've got Kirby coming back on Monday. So have a great weekend.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.